bureaucracy. And we'll go over a few examples as well. And then we'll talk about the jobs of the workers of the bureaucracies, which are called bureaucrats. Then we'll learn the 5 pathologies, which also stands for the flaws of the bureaucracy system. And finally, we'll learn about how the different branches influence the bureaucracies. So the legislative, judicial, and executive. We learned legislative and executive, and then we'll learn judicial next week. So this is just a review from last week. These are the roles of the president. So they're commander-in-chief, which means they have the power to control U.S. troops. They're diplomat-in-chief, which means they have the power to make foreign relations with other nations. And they're also administrator-in-chief, which just means they're in control of the day-to-day operations of the executive branch. So now we'll start with the bureaucracy. It refers to the body of non-elective government officials who make and execute policy. And the workers are unelected, they're highly trained professionals. So unlike like congressmen and stuff, these are selected based on their skill, and they don't need to be elected by the citizens. They also have task specialization, which means the different bureaucracies are specialized in different subjects. So we'll talk about this later in the examples. They're organized in departments and agencies. So under the bureaucracy, which is like it refers to the whole, like all the agencies and like departments in the executive branch. So they're organized in these. And it's difficult to fire bureaucrats, which protects the workers there. And the heads and the high-level bureaucrats are actually not hired based on their skill. They're appointed by the president. So these are different examples of agencies and departments. So we have the DMV, which is the Department of Motor Vehicles. And what we said before about like task specialization, the DMV specializes in cars and like motorized vehicles. And they execute legislation about like cars and stuff. And then the FDA we have here. My mom works in the FDA. She's a bureaucrat there. Some of your moms may also work there. And it stands for the Food and Drug Administration. And they basically specialize in like medicine and drug usage stuff. So that's their task specialization. And then we have the Social Security Administration, and their task specialization is in the Social Security system. So they execute legislation based on Social Security. So when Congress makes laws about Social Security, the Social Security Administration puts them in action, kind of. And it's part of the executive branch, so they execute these laws. Now we have the bureaucrats. So they can implement laws, so they can carry out laws, like I said before, and executive orders as well. And it's the process by which a law or policy is put into operation. So if Congress makes a law about like medicine and drug usage, the FDA will carry out that law and put it in place. They can administer, which is pretty straightforward. They can do routine administrative works and services. And then they can regulate. So this is where the bureaucracy gets most of its powers. So they can issue rules and regulations that impact the public, and they can attempt to control or change some practice in the private sector. So the Department of Homeland Security, they made the rule where you had to like take off your shoes at airports. So that they made that rule because that's their area of specialization. So now we have the 5 pathologies. First, we have red tape, which basically refers to how complex the bureaucrat system is, and it symbolizes the hassle that the citizens have to endure when they deal with the government. So basically, like when you call like an agency or something, they always direct you to other people. So it makes it really complex since everyone has like such a specific and like individualistic role. So if you see here, there's like a little comic and they're talking about mailing a letter to Clinton, and each of them do a little part of the job, and it needs like a lot of people, and each of them has such a specific role that it's hard to keep track. So that's basically red tape, how complex the system is. And then we have conflict. It's when different agencies and departments seem to be working against each other. So when 2 agencies have like a similar policy to make, they often make it different, so it conflicts with each other. And so if you see this cartoon up here, you can see how the bureaucracy is getting in the way of like planning. So if they just plan something between departments, it'd be much easier and like more efficient. And now we have duplication, which is basically like the last one, but this one is like when 2 departments just make the same policy when it just could have been one. So they're like wasting a lot of time and energy. And then we have imperialism, which means the bureaucracy is constantly growing. So there's constantly more agencies and departments being added in, and it's getting a little much. And then we have waste. So they waste a lot of valuable time and money and have no real outcome. So like this cartoon here, they're wasting a lot of money and the money's going down the drain. So kind of referring back to the duplication, like they're wasting a lot of workers and time and money just to get to the same result. So now we'll go on to how each branch impacts the bureaucracy. So the Congress, they can pass legislation, which the bureaucracy has to execute. They can pass specific laws in order to limit bureaucracy powers. They can abolish existing programs. So if there's like a department that's not confounding to Congress's wishes, they can just abolish it completely. They can use oversight, which we learned in the 3rd lesson. They can investigate the bureaucratic activities, and they could also hold testimonies on workers. And they also have power of the purse, so that's like funding. So if there's a department they don't like, they'll fund less money towards them and stuff, so they can't get what they want done. And then the president, they can make executive orders, which the bureaucracies have to execute. They could appoint or remove top bureaucrats, like I said before. The like head of each department is appointed by the president instead of like being hired with the merit system. And then they can make changes in the agency's annual budget proposals. So each year, all the agencies make a proposal about how much money they need and what it would be directed to, and then the president can make changes in that. And then the courts, they can use judicial review, which we'll learn in the next week, and they can rule any like actions of the bureaucracies unconstitutional and have them be undone. So now we'll just go over some important ideas. So this is discretionary authority, which is the ability of agencies to choose a course of action and make policies, choosing between various responses to a given problem. So like Congress, when they make laws, it's kind of like vague. So the bureaucracies, they can choose exactly how to implement that law and put it into action. So that gives them a lot of power. The Hatch Act, it was made in 1939. It made sure that civil servants or bureaucrats, so the workers, cannot raise campaign funds from their office, and it makes the bureaucracy apolitical. So if you worked at a bureaucracy, you couldn't raise funds for like a presidential candidate or anything at work because of the Hatch Act. And this was made to protect bureaucrats, because if like their boss didn't agree with their political opinions, they could like fire them or something. But now they can't express their political opinions, so you can't have any prejudice. Now we have the Pendleton Act, which was made in 1883. It created the merit system. So the merit system is basically when people are hired based on their skill instead of like elected or anything. And it takes politics out of filing government positions. So instead of like being Democrat and Republican and being elected, they are hired based on how much skill they have in that field. And it was made in response to President Garfield's assassination. And now we have open meeting law, which allows the government meetings to be accessible to everyone, which increases transparency. So if there's like a government meeting and you want to sit in and listen, you can go to like DC and sit in the hall while well, probably not now because of Corona, but you could. So that's all for today's class. If anyone has any questions, you can drop it in the chat and I'll try my best to answer them. But if not, we can end class now. I see a chat. Yeah, no problem. Thank you all for coming.